He found out I had a work husband, and his next move left me in tears. Hello, Reddits, there's trouble. Like, I've gotten myself in so much trouble, I wish the ground would open up and swallow me up because of how much trouble this is. I am Amanda, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married to my husband Eric for 8 years. I always thought we had a solid marriage. It wasn't perfect, of course, no relationship ever is, but it felt steady and dependable, the kind of partnership you could rely on. Or at least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realize just how blind I was to the cracks forming under the surface. A few months ago, I started joking about having a work husband. It was Mike, a coworker I got close to at the office. At first, it was just harmless fun, or so I told myself. Mike was charming, funny, and easy to talk to, and the nickname felt like a playful way to describe our friendship. Everyone at the office joked about it, and I didn't think twice about joining in. It was silly and innocent, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Eric knew about Mike from the beginning. I never hid the fact that I worked closely with him, or that we got along well. I even mentioned the work husband joke a couple of times, laughing it off as something everyone in the office participated in. Eric didn't seem too thrilled about it, but he didn't say much either. He just nodded or made a vague comment about how he hoped Mike was a decent guy. I took his reaction as indifference and thought nothing more of it. The truth is, I liked the attention. I liked having someone at work who made me feel seen and appreciated, especially when things with Eric had become so routine. Our marriage had slipped into a rhythm of predictability over the years. Eric worked long hours, and when he wasn't working, he was focused on his hobbies, fixing things around the house, watching sports, or scrolling through his phone. He wasn't neglectful, but he wasn't exactly present either. I felt invisible sometimes, like I was just another part of his routine. Mike was different. He noticed things about me, small things, like when I changed my hair or wore a new outfit. He made me laugh on days when I felt stressed or overwhelmed. When I vented about a frustrating client or an endless meeting, Mike always knew the right thing to say to make me feel better. Over time, I started looking forward to seeing him every day. I told myself it was just friendship, nothing more. But deep down, I think I knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just the time we spent together at work either. We started texting outside of office hours, sharing memes, jokes, and little snippets about our lives. It felt harmless at first, just a way to stay connected during the downtime, but those conversations became more frequent, more personal. I found myself telling Mike things I hadn't even told Eric, confiding in him about my insecurities, my frustrations, my dreams. And Mike shared just as much with me. The more we talked, the closer we became. I remember the first time I felt that pang of guilt. It was late one night, and I was sitting on the couch next to Eric, texting Mike about something silly that had happened at work. Eric was scrolling through his phone, oblivious to what I was doing, and for a split second, I wondered what he would think if he saw the messages. But I pushed the thought away, convincing myself it didn't matter because I wasn't doing anything wrong. That's the story I kept telling myself over and over again. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Mike was just a friend, a confidant, someone who made my long work days a little easier to get through. I wasn't cheating. At least not really. But the lines were already starting to blur, and I ignored every warning sign along the way. The first time Mike called me his work wife, I laughed it off, pretending it didn't mean anything. But it did. It made me feel special, like I was someone he valued in a way that went beyond a typical friendship. I started leaning into the nickname, using it as an excuse to spend more time with him, to justify the closeness that was already forming between us. And then, one day, I realized I wasn't just looking forward to seeing Mike. I was missing him when he wasn't there. When he called in sick or had to leave early, the day felt emptier, less exciting. I started going out of my way to spend time with him, staying late at the office or grabbing coffee before work. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just being a good friend, but deep down, I knew I was crossing a line. I just didn't want to admit it. The turning point came when Mike and I went out for drinks after work one evening. It wasn't unusual. We'd grabbed drinks before with other coworkers, but this time, it was just the two of us. The conversation felt different, more personal, more charged. By the end of the night, we were standing in the parking lot, and Mike leaned in closer than he ever had before. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. And instead of pulling away, I froze. I wanted it. I wanted him. Nothing happened that night, but the damage was already done. That moment changed everything. It made me realize that what I had with Mike wasn't just a friendship. It wasn't just banter or inside jokes or silly nicknames. It was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to admit to myself, let alone to Eric. Now, here I am, sitting in the ruins of my marriage, wondering how I let things spiral so far out of control. Eric knows everything. He found the messages, the calls, the truth I tried so hard to ignore, and now he's gone. He's left me to face the consequences of my actions, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to fix the mess I've made. When Eric and I first got married, everything felt exciting and full of possibilities. We were young, in love, and ready to take on the world together. Eric was the kind of man who made me feel safe and supported. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he was dependable, and that's what I thought I wanted. As the years went by, though, our relationship changed. It didn't happen all at once. It was more like a slow drift. Eric became more focused on his career, taking on long hours at work to secure promotions and pay raises. I understood that he was doing it for us, for our future, but his absence started to weigh on me. By the time he came home in the evenings, he was usually exhausted, and the little energy he had left was spent on his hobbies. It wasn't that Eric was a bad husband, far from it. He was kind, steady, and always there when I needed him. But he wasn't present in the way he used to be. The affection, the little moments of connection, the spark that had defined our early days together, they were all gone. I felt like we had become roommates more than partners, living parallel lives under the same roof. I tried to talk to Eric about it a few times, but he didn't seem to understand what I meant. He thought that providing for us financially and keeping the house running smoothly was enough, and maybe for some people it would have been. But I felt invisible, like a piece of furniture he'd grown used to having around. That's when I started my new job at the marketing firm. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to do something for myself and regain a sense of purpose outside of our marriage. The work was challenging but rewarding, and the office had a friendly, laid-back atmosphere that made it easy to settle in. Then I met Mike. Mike was one of those people who could light up a room just by walking into it. He was charismatic, funny, and incredibly easy to talk to. Unlike Eric, who was reserved and introverted, Mike thrived on social interaction. He had a way of making everyone feel special, like they were the most important person in the room. We hit it off immediately. At first, it was just casual office banter, laughing at each other's jokes, sharing stories about our weekends, and venting about difficult clients. But the more we talked, the more I realized how much I enjoyed his company. He had this infectious energy that made even the most stressful days bearable, and I started looking forward to our conversations more than I should have. The nickname Work Husband started as a joke. Someone in the office had commented on how often Mike and I were together, and before I knew it, the name stuck. I laughed it off, thinking it was silly, but deep down, I liked the way it sounded. It gave a name to the connection I felt with Mike, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. Over time, our relationship deepened. It wasn't just office jokes and lighthearted banter anymore. We started texting outside of work, sharing memes and inside jokes that no one else would understand. The texts soon became more personal. I found myself telling Mike things I hadn't even told Eric, opening up about my frustrations at home, my insecurities, and my dreams for the future. Mike listened, and he responded in a way that made me feel seen and understood. Mike, in turn, started confiding in me. He told me about his struggles at work, his own relationship problems, and the things that kept him up at night. It felt like we had this unspoken bond, a connection that went beyond the office walls. At home, things were getting worse with Eric. He noticed I was distracted and distant, but when he asked if everything was okay, I brushed it off. I told him I was just tired from work, that it was nothing to worry about. I didn't want to admit that my growing connection with Mike was the real reason I felt so disconnected from my husband. I started lying to Eric about how much time I was spending with Mike. When I stayed late at the office, I told him it was because of deadlines, not because I wanted an excuse to spend more time with Mike. When Mike and I grabbed coffee before work or went out for lunch, I said it was just a normal part of office culture. In my mind, I kept telling myself it was harmless. Mike was just a friend, someone who made my workdays easier. But the truth was, I was crossing lines I shouldn't have. I was prioritizing Mike over Eric in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. The more time I spent with Mike, the more I started to crave his attention. I found myself thinking about him constantly, replaying our conversations in my head and looking forward to the next time I'd see him. I started dressing differently for work, putting more effort into my appearance in the hope that he would notice. And he did. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop myself. Mike made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. He made me feel desired, appreciated, and important, all the things I had been missing at home. Looking back now, I can see how it all started to spiral out of control. But at the time, I convinced myself it was harmless fun, just a friendship that had gotten a little too close. I didn't want to admit to myself or to anyone else that it had become something more. Looking back now, I can see that it was never just harmless fun. It was always something more. But I told myself otherwise because it was easier than facing the truth. My relationship with Mike crossed the line so gradually that I barely noticed it happening, or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. It started with small things that felt innocent at the time. Mike would bring me coffee in the mornings, always remembering exactly how I liked it. He'd linger just a little longer than necessary when we hugged after a successful meeting, his hand resting lightly on my back in a way that sent shivers through me. He'd make flirty comments, nothing too overt but enough to make me blush and smile. At first, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I told myself it was just part of our friendship, part of the playful dynamic we had at work. But deep down, I liked the way it made me feel. I liked the attention, the way Mike made me feel seen and desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at the office, Mike suggested we grab drinks. It wasn't unusual, we'd gone out with coworkers before, but this time it was just the two of us. I didn't think twice about agreeing. I needed to unwind, and Mike had a way of making everything feel lighter, easier. We sat in a dimly lit bar, talking and laughing like we always did, but that night felt different. The conversation was more personal, more charged. He complimented me, said things that made my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. By the time we left, the air between us was electric. As we stood in the parking lot saying goodbye, Mike leaned in closer. For a moment I thought he might kiss me, and instead of stepping back, I froze. Part of me wanted it to happen, even though I knew it was wrong. When his lips met mine, it felt like time stopped. The kiss didn't last long, but it was enough to change everything. On the drive home, my thoughts were a whirlwind of guilt and exhilaration. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time thing that wouldn't happen again, but I couldn't deny how much I wanted him. Less than a week later, it happened again. This time it didn't stop with a kiss. It was after another late night at the office. The tension between us had been building all day, and by the time everyone else had left, it felt impossible to ignore. We ended up at his apartment, and before I knew it, I was crossing a line I swore I never would. The guilt hit me immediately afterward. I sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, wondering what I had just done. But then Mike touched my hand, smiled at me in that way that made my heart flutter, and all the guilt melted away, at least for a little while. I told myself it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything, but that was a lie. Over the next few weeks, our relationship only became more frequent and intense. We started sneaking around during work hours, meeting in secret locations, and finding excuses to stay late at the office together. I became addicted to the way Mike made me feel alive, wanted, important. At some point, I stopped seeing Mike as just a coworker. He became my escape from the monotony of my life, the spark that had been missing from my marriage. I convinced myself that what we had was special, that it was worth the risk. At home, things with Eric were falling apart. I grew distant, avoiding him whenever I could. I stopped initiating conversations, brushing off his attempts to connect with vague excuses about being tired or stressed from work. Intimacy became rare, and when Eric asked me why I was spending so much time at the office, I got defensive. I told him it was because my job was demanding, that I needed to prove myself in my new role. It wasn't entirely a lie, my job was demanding, but it wasn't the real reason I was pulling away. Eric noticed the change in me. He tried to bring up his concerns, saying he felt like we were drifting apart, but I shut him down. I didn't want to face the truth of what I was doing, so I deflected, claiming everything was fine and that he was imagining things. The worst part is that he believed me. Eric wanted to trust me, wanted to believe that I wouldn't do something like this to him. And I used that trust against him. I told myself I could keep my two lives separate, that I could have my marriage and my affair without either one affecting the other. But that was a lie too. The cracks were already starting to show, and I was too blinded by my feelings for Mike to see it. Every time I looked at Eric, I felt a pang of guilt, but instead of addressing it, I buried it deeper. I told myself that as long as he didn't find out, everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew I was playing a dangerous game. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but I was prioritizing Mike over Eric in every way that mattered. And the more I pulled away from my husband, the harder it became to justify what I was doing. But by then, I was already in too deep. The night it all came crashing down felt like any other at first. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted and distracted as usual. I dropped my bag by the door and headed to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, barely noticing that Eric was sitting at the table, his expression unreadable. I didn't realize anything was wrong until I glanced at the counter and saw my phone in his hand. For a split second, I froze. My heart sank as I registered the way he was holding it, his thumb hovering over the screen. That was when I knew. He had seen something. He didn't say anything right away, but I could see the tension in his body, the tightness in his jaw. My mind raced, trying to figure out what he could have found, how much he knew. And then he looked at me, his eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Pain, betrayal, and anger all mixed together. He asked me about the text that had popped up on my phone. I didn't even need to see it to know which one he was talking about. Mike had sent me a message earlier that evening, something playful and flirty that hinted at the kind of relationship we had. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I was so used to those texts that they barely registered anymore, but now, under Eric's gaze, the weight of it hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to brush it off to say it was nothing, but Eric wasn't buying it. He told me he had gone through my phone, that he had read the messages between Mike and me. He knew everything. He knew about the flirting, the meetings, the confessions of love, the plans to meet up. He had seen it all, and there was no way I could talk my way out of it. I panicked. My first instinct was to deny it, to say it wasn't what it looked like. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. Eric had the evidence. He had seen the messages, the texts I had sent to Mike, the things I had said. There was no denying it anymore. Eventually, I admitted to the affair, but I tried to downplay it. I said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that it had just gotten out of hand. I told him I was sorry, that I never meant to hurt him, but the words felt empty even as I said them. Eric's reaction was a mix of fury and devastation. He accused me of betraying him, of humiliating him, of putting Mike above our marriage. He asked how long it had been going on, and when I hesitated, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He knew it had been months, maybe longer, and the look on his face made my chest ache in a way I can't even describe. He told me I had destroyed everything we had built together, that he didn't know if he could ever look at me the same way again. His words were sharp, cutting through me like a blade, but I knew I deserved them. Then, without another word, he walked past me and headed to our bedroom. I followed him, unsure of what to do, what to say, but when I saw him pulling a suitcase out of the closet, the gravity of the situation hit me. He was leaving. I begged him to stay, to talk things through, to give me a chance to fix it, but he wouldn't listen. He said he couldn't stay in a marriage where he felt like the second choice, where I had so clearly chosen someone else over him. I watched in silence as he packed his things, my heart sinking lower with every shirt he folded, every drawer he emptied. I wanted to say something to stop him, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say that would make this better? Before he left, he told me that he was going to stay with a friend while he figured out what to do next. He said he needed time to think, but he also made it clear that he wasn't sure there was anything left to save. He told me I had broken his trust, that I had destroyed the foundation of our marriage, and that he didn't know if he would ever be able to forgive me. And then he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat on the edge of our bed staring at the open closet, the empty spaces where his clothes used to be. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life, like this couldn't possibly be happening to me. But it was. I stayed up all night replaying the confrontation in my head, going over every word, every look, every moment. I thought about the texts, the lies, the choices I had made that led us to this point. And for the first time, I fully realized the extent of what I had done. I hadn't just hurt Eric, I had shattered him. The next morning, I woke up to the quiet of an empty house, and the weight of it hit me all over again. Eric was gone, and I didn't know if he was ever coming back. Now I don't know what to do, and I am very, very scared. Please, what do you guys advise me to do now? Update. Hi, Reddit. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and I don't even know where to begin. My life has completely unraveled, and the reality of what I've done is hitting me harder every day. Eric has moved out. He's staying with a friend, and I haven't heard from him since the night he left. I've tried calling him, texting him, even emailing him once, but he hasn't responded, not even a word. It's like I don't exist to him anymore, and honestly, I can't blame him. I've spent countless hours replaying that night in my head, going over everything I said, everything I did wrong, and wondering if there was any way I could have stopped him from leaving. But the truth is, the damage was already done. The moment he found those messages, our marriage was over. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I've cut off all contact with Mike. It was the first thing I did after Eric left. I deleted his number, blocked him on every platform, and avoided all the places we used to go. I even told HR that I needed to switch departments, which they thankfully agreed to without asking too many questions. But it doesn't matter. Cutting Mike out of my life doesn't undo what I did. It doesn't erase the months of lies and betrayal that destroyed my marriage. I haven't spoken to Mike since the night Eric left, and to be honest, I don't want to. At first, I thought it would be hard to let him go, but now I can't even think about him without feeling sick. I see now that my relationship with him was a mistake, a selfish, reckless escape from my own unhappiness. I let myself believe that he was filling a void in my life, but all he really did was help me destroy the one good thing I had left. The silence in the house is unbearable. It's so quiet now without Eric here, without the sound of his voice or the little things he used to do that I took for granted. I used to complain about how predictable he was, how he'd spend his evenings tinkering with his tools or watching the same shows over and over. But now, I'd give anything to have that predictability back. I feel completely alone. Our friends have all taken Eric's side, which I understand. He's the victim in all of this, and I'm the one who broke his trust. Mutual friends who used to invite us to dinner parties or game nights haven't reached out to me at all. I've seen photos of them hanging out with Eric on social media, smiling and laughing like nothing has changed for them. And maybe it hasn't. Maybe the only person whose world has fallen apart is mine. Even my family has distanced themselves. My mom called me once after Eric left, but the conversation was short and awkward. She said she didn't know what to say to me, that she couldn't understand how I could do something like this to someone as good as Eric. I didn't have an answer for her. How could I explain what I did when I can barely understand it myself? The worst part is knowing that people are talking about me. I've heard the whispers, the gossip spreading through our social circles. People who barely knew me now have their own version of the story, their own judgments about what kind of person I am. I don't blame them for thinking the worst. I've given them every reason to. I've thought about reaching out to Eric one last time, just to tell him how sorry I am, but I'm scared it would only make things worse. He doesn't want to hear from me, and I have to respect that. But the idea of never speaking to him again, of never having the chance to make things right, is almost too much to bear. I don't know how to move forward from this. Every day feels like a punishment, a reminder of everything I've lost. I see Eric's empty side of the bed, the space in the closet where his clothes used to hang, and it feels like a constant ache in my chest. I thought I could handle the consequences of my actions, but I didn't realize how heavy they would be. There are moments when I wonder if I even deserve to fix this. Eric deserves someone who would never hurt him the way I did, someone who would value him the way I should have. And yet, I can't help but wish for a second chance, even though I know I don't deserve one. If you're reading this, please don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't take the people you love for granted. Don't let yourself get swept up in something that feels exciting in the moment but leaves you with nothing in the end. I thought I was in control, that I could handle everything, but now I see how wrong I was. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, all I can do is sit with the mess I've made and try to figure out how to live with myself. Update. Hi Reddit, it's me again, and this may actually be my last post here. I wish I could say things have gotten better since my last update, but they haven't. If anything, they've gotten worse. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this. It's not like I expect anyone to feel sorry for me. I guess I just need to get it out somehow because keeping it all bottled up is suffocating. Eric is moving on. I heard it from a mutual friend last weekend. She called to check in, but it was clear she really wanted to deliver the news. She told me Eric has been spending time with someone new, a woman he met at the gym. Her name is Rachel, and apparently they've been seeing each other for a few weeks now. When I heard her name, my stomach dropped. I didn't know how to react, so I just sat there in stunned silence while my friend kept talking. She said Rachel is kind and sweet, and that Eric seems happier than he's been in a long time. She even mentioned that they've been going out on little dates, dinners, hikes, things like that. It sounds like everything I should have been doing with him when I still had the chance. I wanted to pretend it didn't bother me, but it did. It broke me. Hearing that Eric is moving on, that he's smiling and happy and building something new with someone else, feels like a punch to the gut. And the worst part is, I have no one to blame but myself. I thought I could handle the idea of Eric moving on. After all, I was the one who pushed him away. But now that it's happening, it hurts in ways I wasn't prepared for. Knowing he's with someone who makes him feel valued and loved, someone who hasn't shattered his trust, is unbearable. I can't stop picturing them together, him smiling at her, holding her hand, looking at her the way he used to look at me. At the same time, I know I have no right to feel this way. Eric deserves to be happy, and I lost the privilege of being the one to make him happy the moment I betrayed him. But knowing that doesn't make it any easier. And then there's the situation at work. If I thought I could escape the fallout of my actions there, I was wrong. Mike has been telling people about our affair. I don't know why he's doing it. Maybe he's trying to make himself look better. Or maybe he's just bitter about how things ended, but it doesn't matter. The damage is done. I've heard whispers in the office, little snide comments when people think I'm not listening. People look at me differently now, like I'm some kind of cautionary tale. They don't say anything outright, but the judgment is written all over their faces. It's humiliating. I found out from a coworker that Mike has been framing our affair as something more serious than it was. He's been telling people that I chased him, that I was desperate for his attention and wouldn't leave him alone. Hearing that made my blood boil. It's like he's trying to rewrite the story, to paint himself as the victim and me as the aggressor. The worst part is, some people believe him. They think I was the one who couldn't keep things professional, that I was the one who crossed the line. It doesn't matter that he pursued me just as much as I pursued him, or maybe even more. None of that matters now because he's controlling the narrative. I feel like I can't even show my face at work anymore. Every time I walk into a meeting or sit down at my desk, I feel the weight of everyone's stares. It's like they're all waiting for me to crack, to pack up my things and disappear. And honestly, some days I feel like doing just that. I've been thinking a lot about leaving the company, leaving the city, maybe even leaving everything behind and starting over somewhere new. But the thought of starting fresh is terrifying. I don't even know where to begin. Where would I go? What would I do? How do you rebuild a life when everything you thought you had is gone? At the same time, staying feels unbearable too. Everywhere I go, I'm reminded of what I've lost and what I've done. The empty house, the whispers at work, the photos of Eric and Rachel on social media. It's like I'm being haunted by my own mistakes. I don't know what the right answer is. Part of me thinks I should stay and face the consequences of my actions, to try to rebuild my life here, even if it means enduring the judgment and shame. But another part of me wonders if it would be better to leave, to put as much distance as I can between myself and the mess I've made. I've been trying to focus on therapy, to figure out why I did what I did, and how to prevent myself from making the same mistakes in the future. My therapist says I need to learn to forgive myself, but that feels impossible right now. How do you forgive yourself when you've hurt the person you loved the most? when you've destroyed the trust and the life you built together? How can you forgive yourself when the one thing that has always been a stable part of your life just suddenly rips off, leaving you bare and very shattered? Do you ever recover from that? Do you ever stop feeling stupid and wishing you had done things better? Do you ever come back from losing the one person that you thought was never going to leave and it is totally and absolutely your fault? I stopped visiting my therapist eventually because her words didn't make sense the more I visited her. She didn't understand the extent of my pain. She doesn't know how horrid my life is without Eric. She doesn't understand how miserable I have been ever since he left and how hard life is hitting me. It felt pointless paying that sort of money and yet not getting a solution. I realized eventually that it wasn't even her fault. It's mine completely. I was the one who brought this whole thing upon myself. I could have avoided it, but I didn't, and now everything has come crashing down. I wish I could go back and undo everything, but I know that's not how life works. All I can do now is try to move forward, even though I have no idea how. Scratch that. I don't think I want to move forward. This is my punishment for losing the one person I should have cherished and held on to tightly without trying to let go at any point. So I guess being stuck reminiscing on what could have been is a punishment I'll need to endure for the rest of my life. But guys, please don't let yourself end up like me. Don't take the people who love you for granted. Don't let yourself get swept up in something that feels exciting in the moment, but leaves you with nothing but regret. I thought I could handle it, that I could keep everything under control, but I was wrong, and now I'm paying the price. And I've never felt so lost before, with nothing and no one on my side. Everything's working against me, including my mind. Goodbye and thanks.